As I welcome you again to your cup of joe, this is your morning devotion right here on the Home Base Ministries Network. Good morning to each and everyone out there, to the evangelist Dexter Friday Sambri de la Rosa and his family, and to Pastor Earl Richardson and the Enrock family. We are at chapter 8 in the book of Ezekiel from verses 11, and Ezekiel is then shown 70 men. Remember, God took him up by the lock of his hair and took him to see all of the workings that were taking place in the temple that should not have been there. Just as so many things are going on in the churches today that should not be there. All right. So Ezekiel is then shown 70 men who he describes as the ancient of the house of Israel. And in the midst of them stood Jaazaniah, who he recognized. He also knew his duties in the temple and his lineage. He identified him as the son of Shaphan the scribe. Shaphan was a faithful servant of the king. His son represents service, just not in the same way. Verse 12, the elders or the ancients and the other leaders of the churches, leaders in the temples, and although they are expected to be faithful to God, they are not. They have been enticed. They are serving in the Lord's temple, but they are serving the ungodly also. They justify their actions. They justify their actions of serving other gods by saying God had forsaken the earth. And what do they do in the dark will not be seen. But God sees everything, and other than that, he shows or exposes their actions to who he chooses. Now, this has to be taken as a warning to the church today. Serve as the father Shaphan, who was loyal, and not as the son Jaazaniah. Elders and leaders are to be faithful to God, only God. Any allegiance or incorporation of any other belief is ungodly and should be looked out for, should be vigilant. Verse 13, God tells Ezekiel to look again, for there were worse things going on in his house. Verse 14, and he saw women in the temple crying after a foreign god believed to be a Babylonian deity called Tammuz. Their worship to this god was intense and required a burdensome loathing, as these women were literally seen, as Ezekiel says, weeping for Tammuz. I rebuke that in Jesus' name. No matter the civilization that you are in, remain true to God. Do not let where you are influence who you are. The women were taking a very active role in idol worship. Verse 15, God tells him to look again. He will see yet greater abominations than what he was seeing so far. Verse 16, Ezekiel is then carried into the inner court of the Lord's house. Now he sees 25 men in the temple courtyard, their backs facing the temple, and they were praising the sun. The truth is, the entire church seems to be overrun with so many foreign elements and additions. The Bible states that their backs were towards the temple. This means that they were servants of God, but they turned their backs on him. And without fear or any resignation, they serve another god in plain sight. Verse 17, God expresses his displeasure at the things that are taking place, the violence, the idolatry, and says they put the branch to their nose. Only one thing can occur: if the nose is blocked, and that is stifling. The church is being stifled because of their deliberate actions, and we need to be aware of it. Verse 18, God tells Ezekiel that he will not have mercy on those who are destroying his church. There will be no compassion. Even if they are crying out, he is going to deal with them because of their beliefs and practices, especially after knowing him. Beloved, let's be careful of the things we attend to in church. Ensure that it is what God requires as worship and not what you require to worship. Let's understand the wisdom of God. I'll see you guys tomorrow. This is Pastor Solomon De La Rosa in God's